So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Justin Robbins, who is the founder and principal analyst at Metric Sherpa, Incorporated, no less. Justin and I have known each other for a long time, and he's kind of written a book, which we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I just want to say, Justin, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you again. And if you can, give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch on Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I love it. Adrian, thanks for having me. It is always good to get some time with you, and appreciate you doing this as we get ready for this book to come into the world. If we have not met before, I've spent my entire career inside of customer experience operations. I started on the front line of service teams and worked my way into leadership, eventually spent time doing a fair bit of research on the space, and have been an advisor to a number of companies around the world as well. Adrian, when I think about some of the things I've done over that time, it's meant rebuilding QA programs, leading training teams, advising SaaS companies as they build products, or helping global brands figure out how do we create a connected and cohesive experience for our customers, no matter where they're at. Across all of that, what's been interesting for me, Adrian, I don't know if you've ever had those moments where you take a look back of what's the common thread going through my career and the work that I do and the stuff that gets exciting. For me, I realized that I kept seeing the same issue play out at organization after organization, and it was very simply this. Leaders are really good at saying the right things. Leaders care deeply about their teams and the work that they're doing every single day, but the daily work that every single person steps into is teaching something contrary to what's being said and promoted. And that gap has really been, I think, the tension that I've been living in, especially as of late.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that kind of that context. I think you're absolutely kind of right now. But as I said, and as you said, you're just about to birth a new book. And I know how kind of hard that can be. So congratulations on that. And it's called, more than a motto, reignite your purpose, rediscover your joy at work. So I wanted to just get a bit of background on the book. And I wondered if you could tell me about it, how it came about, why you wrote it, and what the sort of the main thrust of the book are.
Yeah, Adrian, it's interesting. In the past few weeks, I've been taking a look back of where were some of the early ideas and some of the early outreach for this book. And it actually started about 2015. And for me, I think that was where I had a light bulb, where I was watching a lot of leaders that I was working with at the time try to inspire their way out of what I believed were structural problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
The system was working against. It's like, I'm going to do everything I can to get my team, despite what might be playing out. And as a result, as I was interviewing now in the 10 plus years since then, thousands of frontline employees every single year, I was seeing all of these stories and anecdotes of engagement initiatives kind of missing what they were really going after. And I was also hearing stories of people who were burning out, and that was the last thing that they wanted. These were people who, they wanted to be doing the work that they were, and yet something inside of them was having this adverse reaction to it. So seeing all of that and really asking the question of, if people feel it, people know it, why haven't they done something about it? Or why do the things that exist out there not enable them to navigate it successfully? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of sitting at me for years, and honestly had probably a few occasions where I started to write this and I was like, I don't know that this is the right thing at the right moment. And so tried to take a pause and be really, really intentional about what we were doing in terms of creating the book. If I think about what is More Than a Motto about, Adrian, it's really three things. At first, it's really about this: how does work lose meaning when our language loses credibility with our people? That's the first bit.
Right. Okay.
The second is that when I look at people who are showing up every day, the problem is not them feeling a lack of purpose. The challenge actually is the way that work happens. It doesn't reinforce and enable purpose to actually be lived out.
Right. Yeah.
And then the third bit is my belief that the most important role that leaders have is to design intentional rhythm inside of the workday and not spend all of their time trying to run a motivational campaign. That's probably, the core three there.
I mean, I think the broad theme, I mean, I know you mentioned rhythm and we'll come back to that. But I mean, the broad theme, I think, resonates with me because I remember thinking about the reasons that I stepped into this sort of space in terms of doing the research and the kind of the advocacy and just trying to find out the clues. And one of the things that always struck me was that having built things that had the customer and employee value at their heart, as it were, it always struck me and frustrated me how often organizations get in the way of their people doing a good job. And I just think we're talking like the same kind of thing. And like, I mean, I'm like 18 years kind of on from there, and I'm a bit like, it's still the same.
Yeah.
And we're still looking for the same kind of clues. And so, but I also wanted to ask you about, so that the theme can resonate with me, but I also wanted to ask you about, and because I know your work is primarily in the service and the experience space, but the book isn't specifically focused on those domains. But I just wanted to wonder, is this like a step to the side, or is it you're going, actually, it's very relevant to those domains, and it's a key part of actually solving kind of like some of the issues that we're facing?
Yeah, Adrian, this is this has been, I don't even know that it's the existential crisis, but for me, as I was thinking about this, there's very much a tension of what is the public identity and the momentum that I've built and that I'm doing, and then at my core, what is the thing that I believe is going to undermine or enable all of that?
Right.
And when I sat with this, there were a couple things that maybe they were comforting me, maybe they're just things that I'm telling myself this is the way that I believe it is, but I know, and I believe that you'll agree, and I've asked this question thousands of times and everybody acknowledges it. What happens with our customer experience is a downstream of what is happening with our employee experience. Let's
100%.
kind of stop there. And then when we think about what does this really explore, and to your point, is this relevant? If our internal systems are teaching people to rush, to protect themselves,
Mhm.
our customers inevitably feel that.
Right.
And when I look at CX leaders, where I've spent, most of my career, the people that and the teams that I've been working with, they are living in this constant state of trade-offs. They know the pressure of volume or executive demands. They're living in this world of escalations, of conflicting metrics. It's in a lot of ways, it was a great test case on,
Right.
is there a place for this? And then when I start to speak to people outside of customer experience, realized, yeah, this is the case. I mean, Adrian, I have a message from somebody this week who's very senior level in a healthcare system that, they were like, this is the tension I live in every day.
Sure.
And so this was, affirming for me. I think in some ways, Adrian, it's squarely where I've always been, but it's also addressing it in a way that's going to be universally relevant, I think, to a lot of people.
Right. Okay. I mean, which is great. But here's what I want to do to give people a flavor of the book, and so I want to dig into a few things that stood out for me. And one of the first things I wanted to dig into was so the book mentions this thing called the leadership blind spot, and gotta love a blind spot. So I wanted to ask you, can you explain kind of what this blind spot is and how it affects organizations and their performance?
Yeah. Adrian, there's a quote that I've loved for a really long time from Maya Angelou, and it's, people will judge you by your actions, not your intentions.
Mhm.
You may have a heart of gold, but so does a hard-boiled egg. I've used that quote for years, and I was always trying to figure out, like, why is this getting people to smile and nod? And the leadership blind spot that I look at is really this belief that our intention is translating within our team and that it's reaching the fringes of our organization. We assume that the clarity that we have on an idea or topic is traveling intact. The reality is that it doesn't. And what's actually shaping behavior in our organizations is what our systems are reinforcing intentionally or not. I even think about one of my own experiences where, when I was kind of early in my leadership career, I was talking a lot about my team about, hey, make sure you spend the amount of time with the customer that it takes to understand them, to get it
Mhm.
right, like do the interaction with them justice. I also thought it was really, really important to give them a kind of fully transparent view on how we were managing the operation.
Right.
what I did as part of that is I put together kind of a single page scorecard of all of the things that we looked at and whatnot. And in the upper left hand corner, the thing right beneath their name was their average handle time.
Right.
Now, mind you, Adrian, I never talked about average handle time as something that mattered. But what I learned is the proximity of that on the page, people felt it was of the utmost importance. And I saw their behavior act opposite to what my conversations with them were. And it was like, that was a simple thing that I caught that is happening across so much of the work that we're doing at such a great scale today. That's what this is all about.
I have to ask about the Maya Angelou quote. Did she add the heart of gold and the hard boiled egg bit?
Yeah, if I've been attributing it incorrectly for over a decade, if that was not the case.
No. I mean, because I love it. I love the kind of the thing. I said I've never heard it before. I love kind of like Maya Angelou, and I love the kind of the heart of gold, but so does a hard boiled egg. It's classic. It's brilliant. But it's a great kind of point. And the thing I wanted to also kind of then ask about is this idea of you talk about the book talks about burnout. It talks about burnout as a system outcome, not a personal failure. Now, specifically in the service sort of space, burnout is a big deal, particularly if you're in contact centers. Like attrition is driven by a lot of time by by burnout and things. But burnout across organizations is happening, whether you're in kind of marketing, whether you're in data, whether you're in leadership. The overwhelm is crazy. And so I thought that the statement "burnout is a system outcome, not a personal failure" was just like it almost landed. It went, "Pang." It landed on the table, and I thought I'm gonna have to ask Justin about that. Can I explain what you mean by kind of that, please?
Yeah, Adrian, this is one of those things that for me very personally, I felt and was really trying to understand, like, how do I name it? What's really happening here? And here was my experience. And as I talked to, people that I interviewed as part of this process, here's what played out. Every single one of us can handle a high amount of activity.
Mhm.
Burnout is not, or at least it doesn't start as us being exhausted from having to do a lot of work.
Mhm.
What I actually played out and where burnout was the most pronounced was with high capacity, high performers. And what was actually driving burnout was their sustained compensation for something that was broken. Here you had people that they were shouldering on themselves, absorbing whatever friction was happening in the process or with the customer or whatever gaps were playing out. These were people who were actually trying to, they were protecting the performance of the organization. And what was alarming is when I would interview leaders in that group, they would classify those people as incredibly resilient, and
Mhm.
they would use the high capacity, high performance language. But that is over time, especially, which let's talk about the contact center environment is a environment that is operating out, it's out of constant compensation. And when that becomes permanent,
Mhm.
that's what I mean by this design issue. It's not people with a lack of grit or
Mm-mm.
tenacity. These are actually people who care deeply, and they're trying to adjust for something that is degrading consistently over time. That's what's really causing this.
So I think in kind of like almost imagery and sort of metaphors and things, if that's the right word. And it sort of strikes me as that you're describing a situation like you remember you see the strongman situations where you've got a person or a strong woman you've got a person in the middle of a situation, you've got two forces pulling them in opposite directions, and they're just like "Wah," kind of with brute strength, kind of like it kind of holding things together. And it feels like that is almost what we're talking about here, is that they are just laboring to kind of keep things together, even though they know that they shouldn't have to, but actually it's just a system condition in many ways that they have to do that in order to smooth it because all these other things are causing if you like to use your words, the friction. But there's a point, and I think that's the point of burnout, where it's almost like you're spent. you just almost like have to let go. It's either they're here or here, and then you end up stepping back, and that might be because it's a self-preservation kind of thing, or you're just physically and mentally and emotionally exhausted, and that's kind of where you can like step out. So I guess that for me that explains the whole it's not a personal kind of failure, because actually holding those things together shouldn't really happen. It's not their job.
Yeah, Adrian, and this is what's I think most alarming to me about this is it's not even a matter of people just completely drop the weights. It's actually not that pronounced. People are just doing exactly what's expected and not anymore. Or,
Mhm.
if we look back to research from the mid 70s on psychological absence,
Mhm.
what, I think has been recoined as quiet quitting or a number
Mhm.
of other things. This is where we just get to this place where it's like, why should I be the only one who cares? That's ridiculous. I'm
Mhm.
not going to be that person anymore,
Mhm.
which is like, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that for themselves. Nobody wants that for others. And so again, this for me was this moment of like, what are we doing to ourselves? This is absolutely ridiculous, and we shouldn't be okay with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly, and so and oftentimes people are doing it oftentimes in isolation, and it's so they feel very alone in that, and so it's a really kind of interesting kind of point. But I want to come back. I want to circle back to a word that you used right at the beginning, and it's about this idea of rhythm. But you also said purpose, but I want to kind of like center on the kind of the rhythm side of things, because it's a kind of a key thread that runs through the book. And I wanted to understand how purpose breaks without rhythm. I want you to help me understand, because that feels like it's a real the core idea of of the book.
Yeah. I won't go into my musical background at depth here, Adrian, but I've been a percussionist since a very young age. And one of the things that I'm always looking for is what's the repeatable pattern,
Right.
not just in the world around us, but in the work that we do. And as I was studying the problem, what I realized is that we were almost episodic, or just kind of, we parachute in when we feel like the team needs some motivation, needs some
Right.
inspiration, and then we let things kind of take care of it. Rhythm is that repeatable pattern that actually enables our purpose to thrive. This is when we are under pressure, or when circumstances changes, we automatically default to our muscle memory, to what is already repeating or has been reinforced in our work. That is what we do without even thinking. We switch into that
Mhm.
mode.
Mhm.
And what this is about is, how do we intentionally engineer that repeatable pattern of work, so that when we do, because we're going to have to make changes, we're going to have to make compromises, there are going to be trade-offs that need to occur, rather than it being a circumstantial or kind of unintended reflex.
Mhm.
We have made, as one of my mentors said to me once, an intentional pre-decision about what we do in those moments. That's
Mhm.
that's what rhythm is about. If we don't have that, to your question of why does purpose break without rhythm, because it's counting on you to come in, Adrian, and have some heroic or inspiring or high touch moment to sustain us through whatever pressure we're under. And that, for you as a leader, is now just creating additional tension and pressure that's also not sustainable.
Yeah, and so it reminds me of somebody told me once, years and years ago, that particularly when we think about emergency services, the reason why we don't talk about them as being, in the US, you talk about it being first responders. We don't talk about them being first reactors, as it were, because there's a difference between reacting and responding. And responding is because you've trained for it, you've prepared for it, you're equipped to look for this idea. Because when you react in the moment, then sometimes things go wrong, because actually it's not generally kind of thought out. And if you had a team of 10 people and they're all reacting, then it could get like this random kind of like outcome. But if you have 10 people that are in that sort of, they're in the zone, and they've all understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and they're responding, to your point around being like in a band, and it's all in concert, then you get better and more intentional sort of outcomes.
Yeah, that's and you know what you're moving toward, Adrian. I've given the example recently to people when I asked them to, hey, talk to me about what this whatever is means to you. A great experience. How will your people know it when you see it? That's one of the big questions that I like
Mhm,
to ask. And I equate it to this. If you and I, Adrian, were together in person right now, and I said, hey, Adrian, our mission is to go west.
mhm,
I'm based in North Carolina. Say that's where we start, and we go west. Adrian, maybe you end up in San Diego. I go west and I end up in Seattle, Washington.
mhm,
That is very different direction than saying, hey, Adrian, you and we're going to Union Square in San Francisco.
mhm.
We understand what we're moving toward and the decisions we make inform that. That to me, I think becomes a big part of this as well. Of it's not just about the repeatable pattern, but that clarity and that
Yeah,
focus on where we're going.
absolutely. So I just want to double down on the kind of the rhythm part of it, because rhythm is not just a thing that they're an abstract concept. It's because in the book there's an acronym for a model. Gotta love a bit of framework to kind of like to break things down. So can you briefly kind of like walk us through it in terms of kind of like what the rhythm kind of model stands for?
Yeah. Adrian, at its core, this is about rewiring the way that we work. And I
Hmm.
know that that is not going to come quickly and it is not going to come easily. So rhythm is really meant to be the kind of the operating system by which we design and deliver work and enable purpose to thrive.
Okay.
It begins with that thing I mentioned first in terms of resolving what matters. And that's really about clarity. It's enabling your people to know what wins when priorities collide. That's what starts there.
Okay.
H is about holding the line. This for me is intentionality. There were a number of leaders that did this really well, and they talked about how making sure that standards survive inconvenience.
Okay.
And so making sure that again what we do is very purposeful and we know what is we will not compromise on.
Okay.
Y is all about belonging. You belong here. And how do we create connection? Adrian, you gave that example of the person who's overcompensating and it's often in isolation. One of the things that we reinforce is how contribution must be visible. And that's not about requiring sacrifice, but how do we make sure that the work that people are doing is acknowledged and owned? Tempo. T is about tempo, and this is part of our recovery as well, making sure that energy is not just being exerted, but is actually being built while we're inside of the work. We can't expect people to cover in their time off.
Hmm.
There has to be something inside of the workday to enable that to happen.
Hmm.
Those four are the core of how this actually operates. And then from there, H is about hear the system. And this is really the measurements that we look to make sure that we are being predictive in what we're looking at and how we're watching for strain before performance is actually slipping. And then the final M, Adrian, is about making it repeat. That's that cadence. It's that rhythm that doesn't just rely on memory, but we know time after time, this is exactly how we lock in and move forward.
And I think that's the thing is that you talk about the last one being about cadence. It's like it's about building habits and behaviors at like a individual and a team and a department and an organizational kind of like level. And as you say, kind of I said earlier, it's about this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It's not like a set and forget type of approach. This is something you have to kind of lean into, and you have to, and it's going to be hard work, because unlearning things and then learning new things is hard work. So you always got to commit to the process and the journey as well.
Yeah, and Adrian, for me, what is rhythm really about? It's we are really good as organizations of having a purpose statement or vision and values. And unfortunately, a lot of it just ends as being aspirational. This is really how do we take those things that we say matter to us and put operating discipline behind them. That's that's what becomes incredibly freeing with
Mhm.
all of this is that structure to make this come to life.
Perfect. Now, so Justin, I hope that my handful of questions has given people like a bit of a flavor of kind of what the book's what's the book is about. And I would encourage people to go and and grab a copy when it comes out on the 5th of March. Um, but I wanted to also just kind of like say, before I kind of we start to wrap up and I ask you some quick fire questions, questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or highlight that we missed out? Any kind of big themes in the book that you want to kind of point out that I might have kind of like missed?
I think this is for leaders, but it's also for people who feel like they've experienced this disengagement themselves. What I can say with absolute certainty is that the majority of people who are disengaged, it is not because that they have stopped caring about the work that they do.
Mm-hmm.
This disengagement has become, they feel like if they care, it is unpredictable or expensive to them. And the biggest thing to recognize in this moment is that there's so much incredible potential and care inside of our organization to help us be successful. We just can't be unintentional in eroding it. There's enough working against us.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully this can be one thing that we do for ourselves that enables us to work for our people, not against them.
Yeah. And I actually do think that for me, it'd be interesting to get your kind of take on this. I actually think when you think about leaders in their positions, I think it starts with the way we think about things and how we describe things. Because there's like going back to that quote, the Maya Angelou kind of quote about the intentions and actions and things. But I think it's something to do with the words that we use to describe kind of people and how we think about kind of people. And it all starts there. And sometimes we need to start to really think about, okay, what are the assumptions that we're making about kind of people? How are we thinking about them? How do we describe them? And if you don't scrutinize that, then you're not really going to get under the skin of the whole thing, and then start thinking about how do I actually rebuild from there.
Yeah, Adrian, there's a really good model that looks at three things. The first is our paradigm, to your point. What are we telling ourselves? What are we thinking? What's our internal narrative? That paradigm affects what we do, the actions that we take, and then our actions drive the outcomes. We then look at those outcomes and then either reaffirm or understand. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I love that. It really is, are we willing as leaders to take a step back and challenge the way that we are thinking, considering, approaching this entire idea of how work gets done?
Perfect. So, Justin, ready for some quick fire questions? He rubs his hands. Right. So I've got three. First one is best advice question. And I've been asking people to complete a sentence for me that will then formulate their best advice. And the sentence is this: if you want to improve your customer or employee experience, Justin says, do this.
Stop asking people to push harder inside of systems that are misaligned. Fix the misalignment.
Drops the mic. Love it. Second one, it's a punk one, of course. So which company or brand do you think takes a more punk approach to customer experience, and why?
Yeah, Adrian, when I think about punk, to me, it's who's rejecting convention and protecting principle even when it costs something. And I, as a frequent traveler, as I know you are as well, Delta recently has, without me calling anything to their attention, sent me these notes of, hey, Justin, you booked this and we didn't catch that this discount should have been eligible, or there was this change on price. And so we've gone ahead and we've compensated you for that. We've done this. If I'm not like, I would have never even caught some of these things. And I was like, you are proactively thinking first and bringing this to my attention. And it actually is costing you something. It's costing you, you're losing revenue on those tickets. So I love how they have been willing to visibly fix mistakes with me, and not even me calling it out, but being very proactive in the approach of doing so.
I think the really beautiful thing about that, I think, as an example, is that it goes back to your point around kind of system misalignment, as it were, because actually sometimes, because some of these organizations are so large and the systems are so complex, sometimes you just spot the misalignments, and then it's how you respond kind of like to them in the moment. And they're obviously taking a lifetime value type of approach rather than an incremental revenue approach. So that were a great example. So thank you for that. Final question is, and I've been asking this for a while now because, well, I just think the world's in a weird place and there's too much doom scrolling going on. And so I've been asking people to share with me their very own good news story. So tell me something that you've seen in the last, say, a week or so that you've gone, that's great. That made me smile, made me feel kind of warm and fuzzy inside.
Yeah, Adrian. So my office is in a space that has a number of co-working, and we've got a number of businesses
Mhm.
all based here. And last Friday, three of us who all happened to be named Justin and all
Okay.
happened to be leading businesses were brought together for a panel, and it was on AI, how it affects our environment, what we're thinking in terms of the future. And what was really exciting for me, Adrian, is all of the people in the room, even builders who are doubling down on AI, keep leaning into how this next moment is going to be marked by how we can be truly human
Mm.
in how we're designing and delivering interactions. And someone used, I was like, I don't know that I'm going to go this far, but someone used the language of it might actually ignite a new renaissance of human capability and, human design. And that was really exciting for me, because I think there are going to be really cool advantages, as there have been, over decades, on
Mhm.
what technology enables for us. And the idea that what we're stepping into is actually a moment for all of us to be at our best and to thrive in an even greater way. I love that. I'm going to double down on that idea, and that's the thing I'm going to pursue in all the work that I'm doing.
Perfect. Great story. And fingers crossed that we kind of like we manifest that the that future. Justin, just want to say congratulations on the book. I think you're touching on some really important sort of like stuff. I know, and also congratulations on the effort it's taken to bring a book together, because it sounds like this has been a work in progress for some time. So congratulations for getting to the end. I just want to say people should definitely check out the book. I'll put the links in the highlights when the podcast goes live. But I just want to say, lastly, thank you for giving us a bit of a glimpse inside the book and for sharing your time and your expertise and your insight with me today. That's been awesome.
Adrian, thank you. It is always so good to spend time with you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.